I welcome you all on behalf of Maharashtra Societies Welfare Association and also Griharmony Redevelopment Stakeholder Council and Affordable Housing Welfare Organization of India. And this event is of course supported and sponsored by Taxman, who has got our stall over there. So I welcome each one of you. Today we are going to have more of an interactive session regarding real estate transactions. So there is an interplay in the real estate transaction as far as RERA to start with. Then we have development control and promotion regulations, which talks about various types of redevelopment, and in Mumbai we are all dealing with the redevelopment. Then going forward, then the taxation, it starts with the indirect tax and then the direct taxes, and then all this when you take further, naturally there can be some disputes or there can be some financial problems with the real estate, which means again IBC will come into play. So how the RERA and IBC on both the sides, starting with the RERA, ending with the IBC, and then stall projects, all that we'll discuss today. So we have with us none other than Honorable Shri Gautam Chatterjee sir as a chief guest of the day. So I request you to come on the dais and we'll just call one by one. And we have to deal with the development control and promotion regulation, none other than Manoj Dubbalji, who is the president of Practicing Engineers Architect Town Planners Association India. So I welcome you, sir. Then we have a guest of honor, that is a retired IRS officer and Bharat Tripathi sir. I welcome you, sir, on the dais. And after taking VRS, he is into consultancy advisory to big firms regarding the income tax and other things. So he is there with us as a guest of honor today, and other panelists we have. So we have S.S. Gupta ji, who is the author on, sir please welcome, S.S. Gupta, who is a chartered accountant and the author on GST. I think many of the chartered accountants know him. If you don't know him, then you are not doing GST practice, or you are not a chartered accountant. So he is an authority and type of, all of them have taken out the time. Then of course, Vimal Punanya ji is near and dear to us, dealing with the income tax. So sir, welcome to you. And then we have Snehal Kamdar, who is the president of IP Foundation, Insolvency Professional. There is a IP Foundation, he is the president of that, and more than 1,000 insolvency professionals are the members across India. So we have that. Of course, we have with us also, I recognize the presence of Anand Gupta ji. Please, he is the vice president of the Builders Association of India. We'll definitely have some interaction with him a little later. Then we have with us advocate. Ultimately, as I said, so it starts with RERA, then ends with maybe some disputes. So we need, to resolve. So we have advocate Parthasarathi. Please come on that dais. So I am of course there as a chartered accountant. We have already two chartered accountants. So this is a full pack panelist we have got for you. And what we will do is the session. We'll have initially, I have not kept any of the formalities, because spending time on formalities are not good. So I welcome each one of you with the folded hand, and on behalf of everybody for taking out your time, valuable time. Once again, we welcome you. We'll request our honorable chief guest Gautam Chatterjee to deliberate on redevelopment and his experience with the RERA, and what has his mind as to how the redevelopment should happen. So he will give us 15 minutes presentation on the keynote address. And as far as his presentation or the introduction is very simple, that he was earlier the additional commissioner of Municipal Corporation, BMC, and then he has worked as a CEO, SRA. So then there is again a redevelopment, MADA redevelopment, that is MADA, he was a CEO, vice president. Then housing department, he is a secretary of the housing department, and RERA. As a RERA, he had an opportunity to interact with the central government also. And after retirement, he is doing a lot of, independent director in number of companies. And now also, he is keeping himself active and wants to get involved in this type of activities. So when I requested him, he was kind enough to accept our invitation. So we welcome you, sir. And then after his keynote address, what we'll do is we'll start with the questions related to development control and promotion regulation. One more friend of his is going to come, that is Manoj Daisaria, who is the past president of PIETA. So he is the present president, Manoj Dubal. So both of them will be, ask certain questions related to DCPR, and then other questions, whatever questions you have, it is going to be complete open house. So your questions, the panelists answer for interplay. So I will be there if at all anything, you are asking out of the context. That's it. So myself, I'm a chartered accountant, CRM. Into last 34 years, I'm into practice, but my focus area has been to real estate, Maharashtra Ownership Flat Act, MOFA, deemed conveyance, housing society formation, NPOs, and bringing people together, making them a house, forming a housing society, and wherever the builders do not complete the project, I get in there, form a housing society, pull the resources and get the project completed. When the RERA came in, yes, I did involve in the RERA activities, and prior to that there was a Maharashtra Housing Regulation and Development Act 2012, who is none other than Gautam Chatterjee was the housing secretary at that time. It is his creation of Maharashtra Housing Regulation and Development Act 2012, and based on that act, the Central Act RERA has come in, and you will see that there are various acts, but Maharashtra Housing and Regulation Act has been repealed in in RERA. Last 92 section is repealed. Why they have done that? The reason is very simple. Everything has been borrowed from Maharashtra Housing Regulation and Development Act, and I was fortunate enough to be with him also in forming that law. Yes, sir.
Makes me happy that this organizers have put together this session, which essentially is awareness creation on a very important sector, the real estate sector. We are all aware how important the sector is, what its contribution is to the country's GDP, to the employment creation, and various other things. And still, it's a fact that for last 70 years, there was no regulation in the sector. So the sector remained unregulated, sector remained unorganized, and therefore it was very much needed that there should be something which would come in, which would regulate the sector. And as just Mr. Prabhu pointed out, in 2012, Maharashtra, as has been the case in most of the statutes that have come up, Maharashtra has always been a progressive state. In 2012 itself, it came up with this regulation in the real estate sector. However, before it become an act and before it could be activated, the central government brought in this act called RERA. And now the sector, since the last 7 years, is a regulated sector. Lot of things have changed in the sector, and all stakeholders of the sector do unanimously believe that this has been a paradigm shift in the way transactions, real estate transactions take place. And I'm happy that in today's session, we will have various types of transactions being deliberated upon, from taxation to GST to the DCPR, which forms the basis on which the projects are taken up. Essentially, I'll just touch upon briefly as to what exactly was the problem in the sector and how it was being tackled through RERA. The problem of information asymmetry, of problem of people who are buying into projects, not able to get information about projects, and that information asymmetry has been removed through RERA in a web portal, bringing out all information about any project where any home buyer has to buy a home. The problem was of trust deficit between buyers and sellers, of buying into an apartment or an office or whatever by your life savings and still not having faith in the person from whom you are buying. So trying to establish the trust between the buyer and seller to a large extent is being achieved through various methods of quasi-judicial resolution of grievances and also conciliation and mediation. And third, most important, the problem of the past of a project undertaken, starts and thereafter never sees the light of the day and never gets finished. So completion of projects is another problem which was there. Still, to a large extent, we have the legacy problems, but then to a large extent, it has also been resolved. So transparency, trust, and timely completion were the three things that RERA is trying to achieve. It's still initial steps because it's in the 7th year and we are talking about 70 years of problem. 7 years is too little a time to resolve that, but I'm sure that the path that it has taken is the right path. Now, while talking about RERA and talking about transactions in real estate, one very important transaction that takes place especially in Mumbai and the Mumbai metropolitan region and also in Maharashtra, now catching up across the country, is of redevelopment. Because cities grow old and therefore the buildings will have to be pulled down either on an individual basis or on an area development basis and will have to be rejuvenated and reconstructed. Now, Section 3 of the RERA Act talks about that it's for new tenements which are being constructed, which are being bought by people. They are under the regulation of RERA. But in redevelopment, though there will be a cross-subsidy element being generated from the new FSI, which the DCPR will talk about, which generates extra buildability, which is sold and which generates the cross-subsidy for the old tenements or the old tenants or the old housing society members to get their tenements free of cost. Those tenements which are awarded to the existing residents do not come under the purview of RERA because they are not being sold to them. They are only a replacement tenement that they are getting against the old tenement that they had. And therefore, there has been huge pain in redevelopment, especially in Mumbai. You will be hearing about them. There are high court orders which are coming in also. And especially in redevelopment, a project starts and then takes 7-10 years and maybe people are like me, senior citizens who are wondering whether they will at all get an opportunity to go back to their new home or not. And we were trying to examine that if suppose this aspect of redevelopment, especially for the rehabilitation tenements, which is not getting covered under RERA, until the government comes up with something which also tries to regulate this sector and relieves the pain that is there in this sector, can there be something which stakeholders coming together can do it or not? And in that context, we came up with what is put up now, and I'll briefly in 10 minutes try to run you through what is the thinking process that we have been going through in the last 2-3 months. And we have been discussing with the professionals also, who also feel that it will be a great idea if you are able to put it in practice. So this is a Section 8 company that is being thought of, which is a company which is being formed by all stakeholders who are involved in redevelopment. Now, if we talk about stakeholders in redevelopment, there will be one who are at the receiving end, who will receive the services, which are the housing societies or the proposed housing societies if we are talking about say maybe a slum redevelopment, or a proposed housing society if you are talking about a tenanted building in a cessed building. So these are buildings which may not have members of a registered society, but these are members of a building who are either tenants or proposed members of a society or registered members of a society, who ultimately will then become owners into a redeveloped building. Now, these housing societies are the recipients of the services that will be there. So, they are a stakeholder, recipient stakeholder. And there are the others who would be the giver. The givers would be, of course, the PIETA members, because they will be the architects and the PMCs who will first come in to guide the society as to how should they go about in this whole process of redevelopment. There will be legal professionals who will tell them what legal documentation will be required, what will be the other agreements or the draft agreements that will have to be prepared and have to be signed. There will be the developers who will come in and who will actually do the job for them. There will be the contractors who may actually work on behalf of a self-redevelopment society, who will come in as a supply contractor for various other things, or labor contractor, and various other professionals. For financial matters, there will be the chartered accountants. So these are all on the other side of the providers of the service. Does it operate on its own? Yeah. Now, this I said redevelopment, of course, is needed for all cities as they grow old. And as I mentioned, that these 3 T's of transparency, trust and time stipulation, which is there already being established for new projects in RERA, is something which we thought could be also replicated when we talk about a council which will oversee redevelopment processes and try to achieve transparency, trust and timely completion. Now, as I mentioned, these are the 3 things which is there, but then the rehabilitation component is not getting covered there, and therefore the need to see how do we try and bring this. If we see what are the policies today of the government of Maharashtra, there are 2 GRs of 2019. One is issued by the Cooperation Department and one is issued by the Housing Department. And they actually talk about how do you empower essentially a housing society which wants to go ahead and either get a redevelopment done through a developer or get a redevelopment done on a self redevelopment mode. So the housing department circular talks about the self redevelopment. The cooperative department talks about redevelopment, which includes also self redevelopment. Now it also talks about certain things in this 2019, the 5-year-old GR, that there has to be selection of the PMCs or the architects from the panel which is there available. Now somehow the government still has not come up with that panel. So there was a gap. We felt that there can be something where the stakeholders themselves come together to create a panel which essentially then facilitates the decision making for the society to go and then select from that panel. That panel has to be of people with established credentials. It talks about a website, again, the concept of transparency, a website which will enable the housing society to go through the process of appointment of a contractor and various other functions that are being carried out in the process of redevelopment to be made available in the website, so that every member of the society has access to that information. Because again, access to information is another problem, due to which lot of problems also happen. Society redevelopment gets stalled because members feel that certain members of the society who are running the managing committee, they are concealing the information, they are not parting with all the information with all the members. And therefore, how do you bring in transparency through the website? So that was another idea. And various other processes which have been talked about, which are actually not happening today, and therefore the pace at which redevelopment should happen is not happening. And wherever it has happened and it has got stalled, it has created huge pain for various other people. So as I mentioned, these are the two things: one window approval, incentive, floor space index. Various other things have been talked about in GR which have not been totally implemented. The DCR, the unified DCPR for the rest of Maharashtra and the DCPR for Mumbai. We have two experts here who will be talking about that. So you will have questions on that. You can certainly throw those questions to them. We try to capture as to what are the stages through which redevelopment goes. And this is what this, I'll not run you through this whole thing, but there are these 10-12 stages, and each of these stages involve certain professionals whose help would be required by the society if you have to take the process of redevelopment forward. And the problem that a society would face is that where do I find the right person? Who do I contact? Am I dependent on someone? I'll go and talk to Manoj Bhai. He will suggest, why don't you go with him? Rather than doing that, if I have information available somewhere with all the credentials available where I can make the choice, I think that will be a much better thing to do. And therefore, the idea emanated that if we could create a body, a legal entity, which would be a non-profit organization, a Section 8 company, which will be involving all the stakeholders. So there is no profit motive here. All stakeholders feel that this is something which is good for society, and therefore can we come together to take it forward till the government says, yes, this is the right thing that you are doing. We also support you in this venture. So essentially, it will be all information and guidance. So redevelopment, what is it? What are the processes involved? What are the basic guidelines or things that are available from the government or from the experts? That will be available at one go. So any society can actually access that and get information and update it. So awareness creation is there. It will empanel all the trusted professionals. As I mentioned to you, professionals from all these fields, from legal, architects, engineers, developers, and various other fields, chartered accountants, all of them would be required by any society to go through the process of redevelopment. Now, if that information is available through this body, which will enlist these professionals and those enlisted names will be available, the society can then go through that and then make that the marriage can happen. So it becomes an e-marketplace where one chooses the other. It can also help in the process of the tendering when you have to go through a tender process. It can then also help you in the monitoring of the project so that the timely completion, and that will happen if you put timeline for each process that is involved in the redevelopment and then monitor those timelines, and also do mediation whenever there are two stakeholders who are at loggerheads or there is some problem or some grievance between them. Can you use the Mediation Act, which is now an act of the government, to resolve the problems? As I mentioned to you, all the stakeholders fall into these three categories. The service receivers are the societies. The service facilitators are the housing federations to which the societies owe allegiance. Also, we have the financial institutions, the banks, the NBFCs, the alternate investment funds, and the service providers, as I mentioned, the project management consultant, development managers, developers, lawyers, architects, chartered accountants, suppliers, engineers, and so on and so forth. So basically bringing all these people together and trying to serve as a centralized platform where the services can be provided. So this is essentially what is there in our mind, and of course it has to be self-sufficient because it has to run on itself, but then it will not be a profit making body, but still it will require maybe some corpus. So it will create that through having some members from these communities to join in, and because they'll have to, it's a self-regulatory organization. The organization will be run by the stakeholders themselves. There's no one else. There's no government which is coming and running it. And there'll be the enlisting fees which should be enabling them to run the whole thing. So that is essentially the proposal that we have in mind. We are going through this. We will be making presentation to the various functionaries in the government. We have been talking to the stakeholders, their organizations. We had a meeting with PIETA. We had a meeting with Builders Association. And the initial response from each one of them was that this is the right step and that we should go ahead. And we have been having meetings also with the chartered accountants, various places where the housing guru, Ramesh Prabhu, has been taking me. And I feel that, and if you all agree, because all the professionals I'm talking to, that yes, this is the right step, then I think this gives me also some sort of a motivation that yes, I should put in time to take this forward. Thank you so much.